The crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden light across the ballroom, but Elena felt cold. She stood near the tall windows, watching the guests move through the room like colorful fish in an expensive aquarium. Women in designer gowns, men in tailored suits, laughter that sounded rehearsed, smiles that never quite reached the eyes. This was her home, her party, her life now. And yet, after 3 years of marriage, she still felt like a stranger who had wandered in through the wrong door. Her husband, Richard, was somewhere across the room, surrounded by business partners and old friends. She could hear his deep laugh cutting through the noise. That laugh had been the first thing she noticed about him, back when he was just a tired man sitting alone at a corner booth in the diner where she worked. He had ordered black coffee and apple pie, and when she brought it to him, he looked up at her like she was the first real person he had seen in weeks. That was 4 years ago, before she knew his last name was Chen, before she knew he owned half the tech companies in the city, before she knew that falling in love with him would mean stepping into a world that would never fully accept her. Elena smoothed down the front of her dark blue dress. It was simple compared to what the other women wore, but Richard had picked it out himself. He said the color reminded him of the ocean at night. She had smiled when he said that, because he always noticed things like that. Colors, details, the small things that other people missed. She wished he would notice how much she was struggling tonight. The annual charity gala was always the hardest event of the year. Everyone who mattered in Richard's world gathered under one roof, and Elena could feel their eyes on her from the moment she walked in. Some looks were curious, some were dismissive, and some were filled with a kind of cold judgment that made her want to disappear. She knew what they whispered about her. She had heard it all before: gold digger, social climber, the waitress who got lucky. The words followed her like shadows, no matter how many charity boards she joined or how many hours she spent volunteering. It did not matter that she had signed a prenup without reading it, trusting Richard completely. It did not matter that she had said no to his proposal 3 times before finally saying yes. It did not matter that she loved him in a way that had nothing to do with his money. None of that mattered, because in their eyes, she would always be the girl who did not belong. Elena took a slow breath and picked up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter's tray. She did not drink it, just held it, so she would have something to do with her hands. That was when she heard it. The voice came from behind a large marble pillar just a few feet away. She recognized it immediately. It belonged to Catherine, Richard's older sister. Catherine had never liked her. Not from the first moment they met, when Catherine looked Elena up and down like she was inspecting something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of her shoe. "I still cannot believe he actually married her," Catherine was saying. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "A waitress. Can you imagine? She was serving pancakes 2 years before she was hosting galas." Another woman laughed. Elena did not recognize the voice, but the cruelty in it was familiar. "Well, she certainly knew what she was doing. Find a lonely widower with more money than sense, and suddenly you're living in a mansion." "Classic," a third voice added. "I give it another year before she takes half his fortune and disappears." "If she is smart, she will wait until he is too sick to fight it," Catherine said. "He is not getting any younger. She is just waiting it out." More laughter, soft and sharp, like broken glass. Elena stood completely still. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She wanted to move, to walk away, to pretend she had not heard, but her feet would not cooperate. She thought about stepping around the pillar and confronting them. She imagined saying something calm and dignified, something that would make them realize how wrong they were. But she knew it would not make any difference. People like Catherine did not change their minds because of words. They saw what they wanted to see, and nothing Elena could say would ever be enough. So she stayed quiet, like she always did. After what felt like an eternity, she forced her legs to move. She walked in the opposite direction, keeping her head high even though everything inside her wanted to crumble. She found an empty hallway and leaned against the wall, pressing her palm flat against the cool surface. She was so tired. Tired of proving herself, tired of being polite to people who hated her, tired of smiling when she wanted to scream. She had given up so much to be here, not money or status because she had never had those things, but she had given up her peace, her sense of self, the quiet confidence she used to carry when she was just a girl working double shifts to pay rent. Back then, she knew exactly who she was. Now, she was not so sure. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, and she quickly straightened up, wiping her eyes even though no tears had fallen yet. It was Richard. He walked toward her slowly, his forehead creased with concern. Even at 62, there was something boyish about him when he was worried, like a kid who had lost something important and did not know where to look. "There you are," he said softly. "I have been searching for you for 20 minutes. Is everything okay?" She forced a smile. "I am fine. Just needed some air." He studied her face the way he always did, like he was reading a book in a language only he understood. She knew he could see through her. He always could. "You heard them, did you not?" he asked quietly. She looked away. "It does not matter." "It matters to me." She shook her head. "Richard, please. I do not want to talk about it. Not tonight." He was silent for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing gently across her knuckles. "Do you remember what you told me the night we met?" he asked. She blinked. "What?" "I asked you why you were working a double shift, and you said it was because your mother taught you that hard work was the only thing no one could take from you." He paused. "I fell in love with you that night. Not because you were beautiful, though you were, but because you were real. In a world full of people pretending to be something they are not, you were just yourself." Elena felt a lump forming in her throat. "The piano in the music room," he continued. "It has been tuned. You have not played in months." She stiffened. "I do not play anymore." "Why not?" She did not answer, because the truth was too complicated, because playing the piano meant opening a door she had locked years ago, because every time she sat at those keys, she remembered everything she had lost. Richard squeezed her hand. "One day, you will tell me the whole story, and I will wait until you are ready." She looked up at him then, this man who had given her everything and asked for so little in return. And for a moment, she almost told him, almost let the words spill out about the girl she used to be. The dreams she used to have, the sacrifice that had broken her in ways she still did not fully understand. But the moment passed. "We should go back," she said quietly. "People will notice we are gone." Richard nodded slowly, though something in his eyes told her he was not finished. Not with this conversation. Not with whatever secret she was keeping. He offered her his arm and she took it. Together they walked back toward the noise and the lights and the people who would never see her as anything more than a gold digger. But somewhere deep inside, buried beneath years of silence, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. 3 weeks after the gala, Elena woke up to an empty bed. The sheets on Richard's side were cold, which meant he had been gone for hours. She lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake the heavy feeling that had been sitting in her chest for days. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Richard had been acting strange lately, quiet, distracted. He would stare out the window for long stretches of time, lost in thoughts he would not share. When she asked if he was okay, he would smile and say everything was fine, but his eyes told a different story. She found him downstairs in his study, sitting behind his desk with a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up when she walked in. and for just a second she saw something flash across his face, something that looked like fear. "Good morning," he said, quickly shuffling the papers into a folder. "I did not want to wake you." "What are those?" she asked, nodding toward the folder. "Nothing important. Just some business documents." She knew he was lying. After 3 years of marriage, she had learned to read him like a familiar book. But she also knew that pushing him would only make him retreat further. "Okay," she said softly. "I will make some coffee." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Elena." She looked back. He was standing now, his hands gripping the edge of the desk like he needed it to hold him up. "We need to talk," he said. "Can you sit down for a minute?" Her heart started beating faster. Those 4 words never led anywhere good. She walked to the leather chair across from his desk and sat down slowly, her hands folded in her lap. Richard stayed standing. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw his jaw tighten the way it did when he was trying to find the right words. "I went to the doctor last week," he finally said. "I did not tell you because I wanted to wait for the results." Elena felt the room go still. "What kind of doctor?" "An oncologist." The word hit her like a punch to the stomach. She knew what oncologist meant. Everyone knew. "Richard," she whispered, "what are you saying?" He walked around the desk and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. His fingers were trembling slightly, which scared her more than anything else. Richard never trembled. "They found something," he said quietly. "In my pancreas. It is cancer, Elena. Stage 4. She shook her head. No, that cannot be right. You seem fine. You have been fine." The symptoms were easy to miss. Fatigue, some weight loss. "I thought it was just stress." He paused, his grip on her hands tightening. "They are saying 6 months, maybe less." 6 months. The words did not make sense. They floated in the air like something from a bad dream, refusing to settle into reality. "There has to be something," she said, her voice cracking. "Treatment, surgery, something." "It has spread too far. Treatment might give me a few extra weeks, but the quality of life would be—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I do not want to spend whatever time I have left in a hospital bed." Elena pulled her hands free and stood up abruptly. She walked to the window, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. This could not be happening. Not now. Not when she had finally started to believe that happiness was possible. Not when she had finally found someone who saw her for who she really was. She heard Richard stand up behind her. "I am so sorry," he said quietly. "I know this is not fair." She spun around. "You are apologizing to me? Richard, you are the one who is sick. And you are the one who will have to watch." His voice broke slightly on the last word. "That is not a burden I wanted to give you." She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tight, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, 2 people holding on to each other in a world that had suddenly become much darker. The days that followed were a blur. Doctors, appointments, phone calls with specialists who all said the same thing in different ways. There was nothing to be done. Just managing pain, just making him comfortable, just waiting. And then Catherine arrived. She showed up on a Tuesday afternoon with 2 suitcases and a tight smile. "I am moving into the guest house," she announced, as if it had already been decided. "Richard needs family around him right now." Elena wanted to say that she was his family, that she was his wife. But she bit her tongue and nodded politely, because that was what she always did. Over the next few days, Catherine made herself at home in ways that felt less like support and more like surveillance. She rearranged the kitchen. She questioned the staff. She walked through the house taking notes on her phone, pausing in front of paintings and sculptures like she was calculating their value. One afternoon, Elena walked past Richard's study and heard voices inside. The door was slightly open, and she stopped when she heard her own name. "You need to think about protecting the family assets," Catherine was saying. "I know you love her, but you have to be realistic. These women are all the same. They wait until you are vulnerable, and then they take everything." Elena held her breath, waiting for Richard to respond. "She signed a prenup," he said tiredly. "Prenups can be challenged, especially if she claims emotional distress or some other nonsense. You need to update your will. Make sure the business stays in the family. Our family. Elena is my family. She is your wife. That is not the same thing. She has known you for 4 years. I have known you my entire life." Catherine's voice softened, but the edge was still there. "I am not trying to be cruel. I am trying to protect you. Protect what our parents built." There was a long pause. "I will think about it," Richard finally said. Elena waited for more. Waited for him to defend her the way he had so many times before. But instead, she heard him sigh, and then the conversation moved on to other things. She stepped away from the door, her heart pounding. He had not defended her. She told herself it was because he was tired, because he was dying and did not have energy for arguments. But a small, painful part of her wondered if Catherine's words were starting to take root. If maybe, deep down, he was beginning to have doubts too. That night she started packing. She did not take much, just the things she had brought with her when she moved in. The clothes she had bought with her own savings before the wedding, a photo of her mother, a worn copy of her favorite book. Richard found her in the closet, folding a sweater into her suitcase. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice sharp with alarm. "Making things easier," she said without looking up. "For everyone." "Elena, stop." He walked over and gently took the sweater from her hands. "Talk to me." "What is there to say?" She finally met his eyes, and he flinched at what he saw there. "Your sister is right. I do not belong here. I never did. And you have so little time left. You should spend it with people who actually want you to have peace." "You think I would have peace without you?" "I think you would have less stress, less drama, less people whispering about your gold-digger wife while you are trying to die in dignity." The word came out harsher than she intended, and she saw him wince. "I heard you," she continued, her voice dropping. "With Catherine. You said you would think about it." Richard closed his eyes. "I was tired. I did not have the energy to fight with her. So you let her say those things about me. I did not agree with her." "You did not disagree either." The silence that followed was heavy and painful. Elena turned back to her suitcase, blinking hard against the tears that were threatening to fall. Then she felt his hand on her shoulder. "Elena." His voice was soft now, almost broken. "Please look at me." She turned slowly. "I am dying," he said, "and I am scared, not of death, but of leaving you alone in a world that has never been kind to you. I did not defend you to Catherine because I was exhausted, and I made a mistake, but I need you to hear me now." He cupped her face in his hands. "You are not a gold digger. You are not a mistake. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And I need you to remember who you were before you let them make you small." She did not understand what he meant. Not yet. But she stopped packing. Elena had buried her past so deep that sometimes she forgot it was there. It lived in a locked room inside her heart, a place she never visited because the memories were too heavy to carry. But Richard had found a key. It started with a phone call 3 months before his diagnosis. He had been at a business dinner in New York when an old friend approached him. The man's name was Theodore, and he had spent 40 years in the classical music world as a manager and promoter. They had known each other for decades. "Richard?" Theodore had said, leaning in with a curious look on his face. "I have to ask you something. Your wife. Her maiden name, is it Reyes?" Richard had been surprised by the question. "Yes, Elena Reyes. Why?" Theodore's eyes went wide. "I knew it. I knew I recognized her from the photos in the society pages." He shook his head slowly, like he was seeing a ghost. "Richard, do you know who you married? A woman I love very much? No, I mean, do you know who she was? Before?" Richard had frowned. "She was a waitress. She grew up in New Mexico. Her mother passed away when she was young." Theodore laughed, but it was not a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of someone who could not believe what he was hearing. A waitress. That is like saying Mozart was a guy who played piano at parties. He grabbed Richard's arm. "Your wife was Elena Reyes, the Elena Reyes. She was the most talented young pianist I ever saw in my life." Richard had gone very still. "What are you talking about?" And then Theodore told him everything. Elena had started playing piano at 4 years old. By the time she was 8, she was performing at local concerts. By 12, she had won every youth competition in the state. Teachers said she had something rare, something that could not be taught. The way she played made people cry, made people forget where they were, made people believe in magic. At 15, she was offered a full scholarship to Juilliard, the most famous music school in the world. The same year, she performed at Carnegie Hall. Critics called her a once-in-a-generation talent. They said she would be one of the greats. And then, at 16, she disappeared. No one knew why. She simply stopped performing, stopped competing, stopped existing in the music world entirely. Some people thought she had burned out. Others thought she had lost her passion. A few whispered that something terrible must have happened. But Theodore had heard the real story years later, from a teacher who had known Elena's family. Her mother had been diagnosed with ALS, a cruel disease that slowly takes away a person's ability to move, to speak, to breathe. There was no cure, only a long, painful decline that required constant care. Elena had been faced with an impossible choice. She could go to Juilliard and pursue her dreams, leaving her mother in the hands of strangers, or she could stay home and take care of the woman who had given her everything. She chose her mother. She walked away from the scholarship, from Carnegie Hall, from the future everyone said was waiting for her. She got a job as a waitress to pay for medical bills. She learned how to operate feeding tubes and oxygen machines. She held her mother's hand through endless nights of fear and pain. For 2 years, she did this alone. No father in the picture, no siblings, no help. Just a teenage girl and her dying mother in a small apartment in New Mexico. When her mother finally passed, Elena was 17 years old. She had no money, no education, no future. And she could not bring herself to touch a piano. Every time she tried, she heard her mother's voice, saw her mother's face, felt the weight of everything she had given up. The music that had once been her greatest joy became her greatest pain. So she locked it away. She moved to a new city, took whatever job she could find, and became someone else, someone without a past, someone without a story worth telling. That was who Richard had fallen in love with. Not a gold digger, not a social climber, but a woman who had sacrificed her dreams to hold her mother's hand while she died. Richard had kept this discovery to himself for months. He did not want to push Elena to talk about something so painful. But now, with time running out, he knew he could not stay silent any longer. He found her in the garden one afternoon, sitting on a bench near the roses. She looked peaceful there, her face turned up toward the sun. He almost did not want to disturb her, but some things needed to be said. He sat down beside her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the birds singing in the trees and the distant hum of traffic beyond the estate walls. "I know," he finally said. Elena opened her eyes. "You know what? About Juilliard, about Carnegie Hall, about your mother. He paused. About all of it. She went very still. For a long moment she did not move, did not breathe, did not blink. Then slowly her face crumpled. "How?" she whispered. "A friend recognized your name. He told me the story." Richard took her hand gently. "Why did you never tell me?" She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Because it does not matter anymore. That girl is gone. She died a long time ago." "She is not gone. She is sitting right here." "No." Elena pulled her hand away and stood up abruptly. She walked a few steps away, her arms wrapped around herself. "That girl had dreams. She had talent. She had a future. I am just what is left over." Richard stood up slowly. His body was weaker now, the cancer stealing more from him every day. But his voice was still strong. "You are not what is left over. You are what survived." He walked toward her. "Elena, what you did for your mother was not a sacrifice. It was love, the purest kind of love there is. And it did not destroy who you are. It just made you forget." She turned to face him, her eyes red and swollen. "I cannot play any more. Every time I try, I fall apart." "Then fall apart. And then put yourself back together. That is what brave people do." "I am not brave. You are the bravest person I have ever met." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "You walked away from everything you loved to take care of someone who needed you. And then you built a new life from nothing. Do you have any idea how strong you have to be to do that?" She shook her head, but he could see something shifting in her eyes. A crack in the wall she had built around herself. "I am asking you to do something hard," he continued. "I am asking you to remember who you were, not for me, not for anyone else, but for yourself, because that girl deserves to be remembered. She deserves to be honored, and maybe, just maybe, she deserves to play again." Elena closed her eyes. The tears kept falling, but she did not wipe them away. "I do not know if I can," she whispered. "You do not have to know. You just have to try." He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself be held. They stood there for a long time, two people wrapped around each other in the fading afternoon light. Somewhere deep inside Elena, in that locked room she had avoided for so many years, a door creaked open. Just a crack, just enough to let a little light in. She did not know if she could play again. She did not know if she could face the memories and the grief and the weight of everything she had lost. But for the first time in 15 years, she was willing to try. Richard was getting weaker by the day. Elena could see it in the way he moved, slow and careful, like every step cost him something. She could see it in his face, the color fading, the shadows growing darker under his eyes. But his spirit was still strong, maybe even stronger than before, like he was burning brighter because he knew the flame would not last much longer. One morning, he called her into his study. He was sitting at his desk, a cup of tea growing cold beside him. Papers spread out in front of him. "I want to host one more gala," he said. Elena stared at him. "Richard, you can barely walk to the garden without getting tired. How can you host a gala?" "I will manage. I have good days and bad days. I will pick a good day." "Why? Why does this matter so much?" He looked at her with those kind eyes that had first made her trust him all those years ago in that small diner. "Because I want to do something that matters before I go. Something that will last." He explained his plan. The gala would be a fundraiser for music education in poor communities, scholarships for kids who had talent but no money, programs for schools that could not afford instruments, a foundation that would keep running long after he was gone. "I want to call it the Maria Reyes Foundation," he said quietly. "After your mother." Elena felt the breath leave her body. She gripped the edge of the chair, afraid she might fall. "Richard," she whispered. You cannot. Why not? Because people will ask questions. They will want to know who Maria Reyes was. They will find out about me, about my past. Good. He leaned forward. Let them find out. Let them see who you really are. She shook her head. I am not ready for that. You will never be ready. That is not how it works. Sometimes you just have to jump and trust that you will figure out how to fly on the way down. Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to list all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. But she looked at her husband, this man who was dying and still thinking about how to make the world better, and she could not say no. Okay, she said softly. One more gala. The weeks that followed were a blur of planning and preparation. Catherine complained constantly that Richard was pushing himself too hard, but for once, Elena agreed with her. She watched her husband spend hours on the phone with organizers and donors, refusing to rest even when his body begged him to stop. But there was something different about him now, a light in his eyes that had not been there since the diagnosis. He was not just planning an event, he was building a legacy. 200 guests were invited, the biggest names in business, entertainment, and philanthropy. The ballroom was transformed into something magical, with soft golden lights and flowers everywhere. A grand piano sat in the center of the stage, polished and gleaming under the chandeliers. Elena stared at that piano like it was a wild animal that might attack at any moment. She had not agreed to play. Richard had asked, gently, carefully, and she had said no. He had not pushed, but she knew he was hoping she would change her mind. The night of the gala arrived. Elena wore a simple black dress with no jewelry except her wedding ring. She had learned long ago that no matter what she wore, people would find something to criticize. So she stopped trying to impress them. Richard looked handsome in his dark suit, though he was thinner now, leaning on a cane he hated but could no longer avoid. They walked into the ballroom together, and Elena felt the familiar weight of all those eyes on her. The whispers started almost immediately. She heard fragments as she moved through the crowd. Gold digger, waitress, taking advantage. The same words, the same judgments, following her like shadows that would never let go. Catherine was there, of course, holding court near the champagne fountain with a group of women who looked at Elena like she was something unpleasant they had stepped in. Elena ignored them. She had bigger things to worry about tonight. Halfway through the evening, Richard made his way to the stage. The room fell silent as he stepped up to the microphone, gripping his cane with one hand and the podium with the other. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice strong despite his frail body. "I know many of you are wondering why a dying man would insist on throwing a party. The answer is simple. I wanted to do something that matters." He talked about the foundation, about the children who would receive scholarships, about the schools that would get instruments and teachers and hope, and then he said something that made Elena's heart stop. "Before we continue, I want to introduce someone. Most of you know her as my wife. Some of you have opinions about her." His eyes found Catherine in the crowd, and he held her gaze for a long moment. "Tonight, I want you to know who she really is." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But her feet would not move. Richard told them everything. He told them about Juilliard, about Carnegie Hall, about the 15-year-old girl who had been called a once-in-a-generation talent. He told them about her mother's illness, about the impossible choice, about the sacrifice that had cost Elena everything she had ever dreamed of. "She walked away from fame and fortune to hold her mother's hand while she died," Richard said, his voice breaking slightly. "She worked double shifts as a waitress to pay for medical bills. She gave up her future out of love, and she has never asked for recognition or praise or even sympathy. She just kept going, quietly, bravely, alone." Elena was crying now. She could not help it. The tears streamed down her face as 15 years of secrets spilled out into the room. "I fell in love with her before I knew any of this," Richard continued. "I fell in love with a woman who served me coffee and pie in a small diner, who made me laugh for the first time in years after my first wife passed away. Finding out about her past did not change how I felt. It just helped me understand why she is the strongest person I have ever known." He paused, and his eyes found hers across the room. "I asked my wife to play tonight. She refused. She has been refusing for 15 years because the pain of what she lost is still too heavy to carry. But I am dying, and I have one last request." The room was completely silent. Every eye was on Elena. "Elena," Richard said softly, "please, not for them, not for me, for the girl you used to be, for your mother, for everyone who never got to hear you play." She could not breathe. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Every part of her wanted to shake her head, to walk away, to keep that locked door closed forever. But then she looked at Richard, at this man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had loved her when she had nothing, who was spending his final weeks trying to give her back something she had lost. She thought about her mother, about the hours they had spent together at the old piano in their tiny apartment, her mother's voice gentle and encouraging. "Play for yourself, mija. Play because it makes your soul happy." Slowly, Elena walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for her like water. She climbed the steps, her legs shaking, her hands trembling. The grand piano waited for her, gleaming and patient. She sat down on the bench, the keys stretched out before her, black and white, familiar and terrifying. For a long moment, she did not move. She just sat there, feeling the weight of everything that had brought her to this point. Then she placed her fingers on the keys, and she began to play. The first note rang out like a heartbeat, soft, hesitant, afraid. Elena's fingers hovered over the keys, trembling so badly she thought she might have to stop before she even started. 15 years of silence pressed down on her shoulders like a weight she could barely carry. 15 years of grief and loss and locked doors. But then something shifted. Her fingers found the next note and the next, and suddenly the music started to flow, not from her hands, but from somewhere deeper, from the place she had kept hidden for so long, from the girl she used to be. She was playing Chopin, Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the same piece she had performed at Carnegie Hall when she was 15 years old, standing on that famous stage with the whole world watching. Back then, she had played it perfectly, every note precise, every phrase polished. Tonight, she played it differently. Tonight, she played it with everything she had lost, every tear she had cried at her mother's bedside, every dream she had buried, every cruel whisper she had pretended not to hear. She poured it all into the music, and the music poured it back out into the room. The guests stood frozen. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the piano, filling the ballroom with something that felt almost holy. Elena closed her eyes and let herself disappear into the melody. She was not in the ballroom anymore. She was back in that tiny apartment in New Mexico, sitting at the old upright piano with the chipped keys. Her mother was beside her, thin and frail, but still smiling, still believing. "Play for yourself, mija. Play because it makes your soul happy." The music swelled and soared. It climbed to impossible heights and then fell into valleys of sorrow so deep they seemed bottomless. It was grief and hope and love and loss, all woven together into something beautiful. When the final note faded, Elena kept her hands on the keys. She was afraid to look up, afraid to see the faces of the people who had spent years judging her. The silence lasted for one heartbeat. 2, 3, and then the room exploded. The applause started somewhere in the back and spread like wildfire. People rose to their feet, one after another, until the entire ballroom was standing. Some were clapping, some were crying, some were doing both. Elena finally lifted her head. Through her tears, she saw Richard standing at the edge of the stage. He was leaning heavily on his cane, his face wet with tears. But he was smiling like she had given him the greatest gift in the world. She looked out at the crowd and saw something she had never expected to see. Catherine was standing near the front, her face pale, her eyes wide. She was not clapping. She was just staring at Elena like she was seeing her for the very first time. Like everything she thought she knew had just been shattered into a million pieces. Elena did not need an apology. She did not need Catherine to suddenly like her or accept her. But in that moment, she saw something shift in the other woman's eyes, a crack in the wall of judgment, a tiny seed of doubt about all the terrible things she had believed. It was enough. Elena stood up slowly and walked to the edge of the stage where Richard was waiting. He opened his arms, and she fell into them, holding him tight. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you for letting them see you." She could not speak. She just held him and cried, and for the first time in 15 years the tears did not feel like grief. They felt like release. Richard lived for 11 more weeks. They were good weeks, despite everything. Peaceful weeks. Elena played for him every day, sometimes for hours at a time. She played all the pieces she had loved as a child, and she played new pieces she had never tried before. The music room that had been silent for so long was now filled with sound and life. They talked about everything, about the future, about the past, about the little diner where they had met, and the apple pie that had changed both their lives. Richard told her stories about his childhood, about his first wife, about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. Elena told him about her mother, about Juilliard, about the dreams she had let go. There was no more hiding, no more locked doors, just two people loving each other in the time they had left. When the end came, it was quiet. Richard passed away on a Sunday morning, with Elena beside him, her hand in his. She had been playing softly in the next room just minutes before, and she liked to think that the last thing he heard was music. The funeral was large and crowded with people Elena barely knew, business partners, politicians, old friends. They all said nice things about Richard, about his success and his generosity and his vision. But Elena knew the truth. The best thing about Richard was not his money or his empire. It was his heart, the way he saw people, the way he loved without conditions. The will was read a week later in a lawyer's office that smelled like old books and expensive leather. Catherine was there, sitting stiff and silent, clearly expecting to hear that she had been right all along, that Elena was about to walk away with everything. But Richard had other plans. He left the bulk of his fortune to the Maria Reyes Foundation. Millions of dollars dedicated to music education for children who could not afford it. Scholarships, instruments, programs that would change lives for generations to come. To Elena, he left their home, the piano, and enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Not billions, not the empire, just enough. And he left a letter. Elena read it alone that night, sitting at the piano in the music room. "My dearest Elena," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are probably sitting in our music room feeling sad. I hope you are also feeling proud, because you should be. You gave up your future once for love. Please do not do it again. The world deserves to hear you play. Your mother deserved to have her sacrifice mean something, and you deserve to be happy. I know the world has not always been kind to you. I know there will always be people who judge you, who whisper about you, who refuse to see who you really are. But here is the secret I learned too late in life. Their opinions do not matter. The only thing that matters is how you see yourself. So play, my love. Play for the children who remind you of who you used to be. Play for your mother. Play for yourself. And if anyone ever calls you a gold digger again, just play louder. All my love. Forever. Richard. Elena set the letter down and wiped her eyes. Then she turned to the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. She did not become famous again. She did not want to. Instead, she spent her days doing exactly what Richard had asked. She played at schools and community centers and tiny concert halls in towns no one had ever heard of. She gave free lessons to children who could not afford them. She told them her story, so they would know that dreams could be lost and found again. Catherine never apologized, but she came to every single one of Elena's performances, sitting quietly in the back row, watching with an expression Elena could not quite read. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was something in between. Some stories do not end with the villain becoming a friend. Some stories end with the truth finally being heard. Elena played every single day for the rest of her life. She played for Richard. She played for her mother. She played for the girl she used to be and the woman she had become. And whenever the whispers started, whenever someone looked at her with judgment in their eyes, she remembered her husband's words. She played louder.